Good evening, everybody. It's me and the guys on the Games Assemble podcast. Tonight, I am joined by our anointed dungeon master, Batuus,
Hello.
and our very own female Jim Sterling, lady of the hate of microtransactions. It's Nara.
Hey.
And as always, I'm a little bit ginger and a little bit gay. I am the Beardy Major. See, now, I was thinking about the Techno Mage thing. And so I said Beardy Major. Beardy Major! Beardy Gamer, whatever.
Whatever.
New character name.
So, tonight, we're going to have a little chat about an article that we saw on the New York Post about some issues around people maybe being charged for microtransactions and in-app purchases and stuff when they're not really too sure that is happening. But before we get into that, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So this week we're going to be putting up the first episode of Gamer Assemble Bites, which is going to be a little short show on the old YouTube. We're also putting together our plans for 2021. So if there's any style of show or content that you'd like to see us do, let us know. Speaking of which, and as we introduced our Dungeon Master, Bot is going to be launching our D&D show Rolling with Bot in January 2021. And also we're fast approaching the holidays, so next episode 15, will be our last show of the year before we take a little break for the holidays. And we're going to be going through a rundown of the best games, or our best games of 2020. So we want to know what your picks are. So head over to our Twitter and Instagram account, and there'll be a post on there for you to interact with us with. But without further ado, shall we just jump into the topic of the show? So I'm just going to read a little bit of a little thing I may have typed up earlier just to get us all going, and then we'll jump into it. So today, like I said, we saw an article on the New York Post. We're going to link that into the YouTube descriptions if you want to read it. It's also up on our Twitter account on the poll there, so if you want to have a look through, you're more than welcome to. But in this article, a mum faces $16,000 in credit card bills after a six-year-old has racked up multiple microtransaction payments playing Sonic Forces on an Apple device. These charges have ranged from an entry level of $1.99 all the way up to $99.99 for different ring packs. So these rings that you buy in Sonic Forces, they're used to then... So you buy red rings to then purchase gold rings to then get things like speed boosts and like character skins and stuff within the game. It's like a mobile game.
So you have to buy rings to buy rings
You have
to buy the things you actually
have to buy
want?
rings to buy rings, yeah. So it's like a lot of ring buying.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's nothing new. Like, we've seen these kind of microtransactions, monetary things in these free-to-play games for some time. But it's quite shocking that it got to £16,000, and it's not the first time that we've seen this. So the BBC reported in 2019 about 16-year-olds spending $3,000 on NBA microtransactions. TechSport in 2017 runs an article on an 11-year-old spending $7,000 on microtransactions in another free-to-play game, and in 2016 there was $8,000 on FIFA by another teenager. And if you Google
when
it,
it's the teenagers, they 100% know what they're doing. They're just doing it because they think they can get away with it.
But if you Google like kids racking up microtransactions, there's hundreds and hundreds of articles and forum posts and blog posts and stuff about.
And I've met people who personally dealt with it. So
parents that have been facing this. Now, luckily, in a lot of the cases, the parents have been able to like get their money back. But in this case, the $16,000 for this 6-year-old, because of the way that it went through her bank, and she then questioned it with the bank because she thought it was like some sort of fraud. And they did some investigation. It took them 3 months to get back to her and go, actually, no, you need to go and speak to Apple. It's Apple's problem. Apple's now turned around and gone, you had 60 days and you passed it, so it's tough. You need to pay it.
Ouch.
Yeah, so now she faces a huge amount of money.
Hey, Apple, you're not a good guy here.
So
bad guy Apple here.
Yeah, so in all of these situations and stuff, like, it kind of rose the question in our chat, which is why we kind of made it into an episode, is like, do these app stores or the people making these games or credit card companies or your PayPal or whatever, do they do enough to protect you from this kind of accidental purchase? And should they be
as
doing
far as
more?
the Google Play Store, yes.
Yeah.
You could just set it to not let you buy things without a password. Or I use my fingerprint. No one can purchase anything on my Google account without my fingerprint or my password.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the same with Apple, to be fair. Like, with my Apple to Apple Pay, buy anything on app stores. Like, the other night I bought, I mean, I love this film and not many people do like it, but Alien Covenant. Wanted to watch it, bought it. I had to use my Face ID, put in my passwords, everything else. Like, so there are things there in place, but from talking to some of my friends that got kids, like, they don't really understand some of these parental settings, and that
they're kind of hard to understand.
Yeah,
like,
and that
there's a lot of like legal jargon, and it's not just like straightforward. Like, hey, do this.
Yeah.
Hey, do this. I don't think all of the apps. So most apps do display that they have in-app purchases is like this teeny tiny little icon that you could completely miss when you're downloading it. So a lot of parents are downloading these games and they don't even know that their kid can buy stuff in it, because the only thing it does is it's this tiny little icon on the store page, like at the bottom of the description of the game. It says, hey, this has in-app purchases. And that's, not great. I think that game developers have more of a responsibility to at least tell people that you can buy microtransactions in this game, rather than like they do all they're legally required to do and they let you know somewhere, but it's not somewhere where it's readily available to be. So they download the game and they have no idea you can even buy stuff in it, and then it comes as a shock that you're even able to buy something at all. So
Well,
there's
there's
a protection
change
place
to
to stop it, but
yeah, there was a change to app stores a few years ago where all the free-to-play games were labeled as free, and then they changed it so now it's not says free, it says get, and then underneath it it'll list like the microtransactions and stuff. But what do you think about like how these things are displayed in app stores and stuff?
Well, I mean, one thing we got to keep in mind is that when we're talking about responsibility of these companies to, inform the parents well enough about these transactions, is that a lot of these mobile companies, I mean, they're literally hiring psychologists to help their marketing department to make it more disadvantaged for the parent, so that it's all colorful lights and whistles and all that kind of stuff. And these parents, one of the problems I find is that we've really kind of moved into a generation where the electronic devices are the new babysitter. I mean, it used to be you plop your kid in front of the TV, you can at least go and make dinner, have a phone call, but kids can't buy anything watching TV, but you put down their iPad and you put on, this Sonic game, and all of a sudden this kid can't complete a level because he doesn't have enough boost to get through it. Well, he's going to do whatever it takes to get through that level. And when it's 99 cents, it's like, oh, well, that's nothing. It's not like a 6-year-old has any real concept of money. I have adults I work with that barely have a concept of money. As Anar and I were discussing kind of before the episode started, a really easy way around this is that parents need to start looking at putting prepaid pay cards attached to their Google and their Apple accounts, because at the very least, and this is also not just for kids, if your account gets hacked, if you have a prepaid account on the account, if your account gets hacked and someone tries to drain your card, it's a lot better for them to drain a $100 prepaid card than it is to drain thousands of dollars out of your checking account or your credit card. So in reality, I think a lot of it is on the parents. The game companies, you can't expect them not to make money. That's the whole point. Mobile games are often free. And because they are free, they need to have ways of being able to make money. So I think it's more on the parents and to be parents than it really is to put it on the game developers.
I think it's a mix of the two. I've worked with parents to find solutions. A lot of them, they get like the prepaid like Fortnite, like V-Bucks or like the Google Play or whatever cards as like, instead of their kid getting a traditional allowance, that's what they want. So that's what they get. And that they get that. And that's what they use for their IAP. But a lot of them asked me what they should do because they had a lot of those like crazy purchases coming up. Yeah, no, a 6-year-old has no concept of money. And yeah, we have definitely moved away from like real parenting. I have a niece and I love my sister, but she is a hand your kid the iPad all day parent. And one, iPads aren't parents.
Yeah.
And two, like, it's not, and I mean, a lot of people grew up with the TV as a babysitter, and I did for a certain part of my life, but my parents were also involved in my life because, you know, sitting your kid in front of the TV so you can make dinner is one thing. A lot of parents still didn't put them in front of it all day because there were things that like you wanted to watch on TV. So, I mean, my parents still like I played outside and I did, I had to read books. I had a screen time amount that I was allowed, but we were still limiting screen time back then and we're not really anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think beside like, a different conversation of like how parenting is handled these days, the idea of like these prepay cards and stuff, or like parents having to take these extra steps to sidestep these companies that are designing their games to make it easy to buy these things. I think that's moving a lot of the blame across to the parent in some respects. Like,
oh, I think it loops back around.
yeah,
Because, like we talked before the show, how we don't want this to be a video like a talk. We did a microtransactions episode,
yeah.
right? I went on a big long rant, but the problems that we're having loop right back around
Yeah.
to that same conversation about microtransactions and specifically like how they're implemented and what specific games they're implemented in.
Yeah.
I
think
games that are aimed towards adults are typically much more upfront about their purchasing.
Yeah, I think
games that are aimed at children are not.
When it comes to
and I think that's like a whole other. They basically just do all they're legally required to do.
Yeah.
To notify of purchasing.
I think when I think of the whole situation, like if I have a Monzo account, so if I go and purchase something, like 9 times out of 10, if it's over a certain amount, it'll say straight away, you need to approve this on your app. So then I have to go into the app and say, yes, it's fine, I'm going to spend all of this money doing this thing. Like, I don't understand how these, like, app stores or Apple Pay and or the store in general doesn't have something in there that stops multiple purchases within quick succession, or like have a limit on how much can be put through on one day. Because one of these cases, the kid with the £16,000 $1,000 racked up $674 in purchases in one day. Like, and because of the way that Apple works with its invoices and stuff, like generally they will invoice it towards the end of the day. So if you're like racking it up through the day, so they tend
Apple
to like
doesn't send an invoice till the end of the day.
It kind of like accumulates all the purchases together.
I had no idea. Google sends you an individual email every time you buy something.
Yeah. But this is one of the points that the mother brought up, is that she didn't realize that these things were happening because it was the way it was being billed and sort of clumped together. So I kind of feel like, what do you think? Should there be this kind of limit and say like, okay, we're going to say in a 24-hour period you can only spend £100 on it in-app purchases per
until you approve it.
Until you've approved it, yeah.
I mean, I like that idea. I also think maybe Apple should do what Google does, and every time a purchase is made, send an email instead of just lumping it all together at the end of the day. So if I buy anything, if I buy like a 90-cent microtransaction, Google emails me immediately after I make the purchase to let me know that it happened, so that I can go in and dispute it.
Even if you buy with like Google reward points, like I buy stuff sometimes for some of my mobile games through
they email you immediately.
Mm-hmm. You know, in reality, I mean, in the case of this kid who racked up $600 in a day, you know, again, you know, I have a particular want to put the responsibility on the parents, mainly because in a previous life, I worked for a lot of families helping do therapy for children and helping them with a lot of stuff. And the parents just aren't paying attention. You know, they're happy to have, I mean, we have a society now where now everyone is mostly dual income. Mom and dad both work. It used to be mom or dad stayed home and the other one worked. Now with both of them working and they come home and they get home at 5 o'clock and they got to put dinner together, it's just way easier to put the kid in front of something. But like, for example, a really easy thing that you don't even have to do with the company is like I have my bank set up so that anytime a purchase more than $50 happens, it dings me. It just sends me a little notification that just says, hey, a purchase was made on your account over $50. Now, when I'm buying stuff on Amazon, that can be annoying. But at least when something weird happens, like has happened in the past with Amazon, I can take care of it right away and get it taken care of. And you don't even have to know anything about the gaming company. You don't have to know anything about your iPad or what your kid's playing. It's literally just call your bank and say, hey, notify me by email whenever it's more than $50 or something like that. I don't know. It like Inara was saying, it literally depends on the game too, because the ones that are geared more for adults, they're very upfront about it. But the ones that aren't, I mean, there's a lot of adults playing more games designed for kids.
Yeah, but
they're really trying to lure these kids in. I don't know. I don't have children, but if I had kids, I would make sure that I knew what their internet traffic was at all times. Like, just period. Because it's too easy to find stuff on the internet. I mean, I had to tell parents in the past, hey, have a talk with your kid about what he's doing on the internet. And they're like, oh, well, I looked at his iPad. He doesn't have any history. I said, yes, he doesn't have any history because he's deleting it. And if he's deleting his internet history is probably a good reason for it. So have a conversation with him. Oh, okay. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bigger conversation around here. There's two really big conversations that stem off from even just this one topic. One conversation that we've already had about microtransactions and kind of more on how they're implemented versus like why they exist in general. But then the other conversation is definitely about like looking at parenting. And I am a mom. My kid's too young to do that kind of. He's 6. He'll be 6 months in like 3 days.
So
But
cute.
I am a mom. And I think about how I'm going to handle these things. And we have a dual income household. Like my boyfriend and I both work because we can't afford for neither of us to not work. Because that's just kind of the way that the world is now. And it's, my mom stayed home with us. So it was easier for her.
Me too.
But it's like going to be like a what do I do when I get home from work and I'm going to need to do things? I mean, like right now I have a baby, so I just put him in the baby thing and carry him everywhere. Actually really easy to deal with. I have a baby carrier and I just stick him in there and walk around and I have free use of my both hands. It's like, cool. But when he's older, it's going to be harder to just like keep him entertained. Right now he's just entertained by like looking at all the stuff around him, but that's not going to be the case for much longer.
No, and I think as well, like some of the lack of understanding from parents about how these games are made. Like, I mean, you go into the App Store, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's got a 8-year-old, and she said, like, I said, what kind of apps and stuff do your kids play? And she's like, well, they'll play like the Disney Pop, I think it's called, or something, where it's like the kind of like Beehive Mayhem, but you're throwing like little Disney characters up. Like there's like one for Frozen, there's Sonic Forces. Like all of these IPs are like traditionally kid-friendly IPs. Like, so I think a lot of the time parents are kind of getting these games and thinking, oh, it's going to be okay because it's a Toy Story game, or it's going to be okay because...
and when I say the in-app purchases stuff is really tiny, I mean, it's this teeny tiny small print right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest, Pokemon Go ain't super upfront when you spend money.
Yeah. So I think
that's what that was. This is Pokemon Go. I don't even have it installed anymore. It was just I wanted to bring it up to kind of illustrate my point is, the parents don't know a whole lot, and basically these companies are just doing what they're legally required to do to inform people. They're not being upfront about what's going on. And I mean, like my Kingdom Hearts game, Square Enix is well aware that 90% of the people who play Kingdom Hearts now are in their late 20s and early 30s. So they're super upfront when I'm about to spend money on stuff. Like, they're like, hey, this costs money. And like, hey, this is what you get for it. And I mean, like, that game's run by whales, but I have spent a couple of dollars, but it's always like really like intense about like, this is spending money. And I'm not even sure if that might be because it's bigger in Japan and I know they have different laws. So like, I know things are different because you don't really hear about this stuff happening over there. And I genuinely think it's because, like, they do things differently, but games with bigger Japanese markets, I found, also tend to be more upfront. And I'm wondering if that just has to do with the way laws are over there, with how they can
Well,
do those things.
like there's a lot of the different countries that are of Asian origin, like China and Japan and stuff like that. They have to be a lot more clear about loot boxes and like how, like what your chances of actually getting something
Oh,
are.
they have to. Oh yeah, no. When I buy stuff in the Kingdom Hearts game, if you pull up the info, it gives you a list of the exact percentage chance of
Hmm.
everything you could pull from the gotcha, and
Mm.
that's because they have to do it in Japan, and it would just be or just yoink that out of the. Like, why would you reprogram the whole game to
Mm.
yoink all of those out? Just leave them in there. But they have to
Yeah.
legally
Hmm.
include everything you could get in there and the percentages, and they're just a lot more strict about that stuff over there. Um, so I think that plays into it. But a lot of I mean, most mobile games are bought primarily or downloaded primarily by kids in the US and the UK.
Yeah, and I'd also imagine that there's probably a huge increase in these kind of apps being downloaded and stuff with the pandemic because they've got parents working from home. Like, in the case of this article,
And I mean, dear Lord, my cousin downloaded a bunch of apps on his iPad for his daughter because he had to take the bar,
Mm,
and he couldn't even like parent his kid while he was
yeah,
taking the bar. He had to be in a room with the door closed and
yeah,
no one around him,
yeah,
like for
Hmm.
hours.
yeah,
So he had to find ways to entertainment,
mm,
and I mean that's what a lot of parents turn to.
yeah,
And I'm lucky enough to work for a company that when we're at home and we have a conference call, they don't care if I have my kid with me.
yeah,
But there are
Hmm.
other companies that do care,
mm.
and they don't want to have to deal with that.
And
So
it depends on what your line of work is as well. Like, for somebody who maybe does online sales or retail or something, like their workload working from home may not be as intense as somebody that's maybe like a lawyer who's maybe working on cases and stuff and having to do lots of calls and stuff like that, or somebody who works for, like, my cousin works in a billing department for a phone company, like, and he's constantly taking calls and talking to
yeah.
customers and
Oh yeah,
compiling information,
I mean to
like,
be fair, when I was working from home for retail stuff, I was basically on the phone all day. But I'm
yeah,
also a store manager, and
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
little bit, and I'm sure my district manager is on the phone all the time.
yeah,
Um, things like for arranging for things like online order delivery and pickup, and because a lot of what we're doing now is online, so it was just a lot of that.
yeah.
And being on the phone with FedEx for 7 hours every day is not my idea of a good time, but it's how I spend a
Oh
lot of my
man.
Yeah.
time.
Yes, I
They're
think,
super overloaded.
yeah, this is another thing where it creeps up on parents, I think, where, like, they are in this situation where they have to work from home, and usually the kid would be at school or doing whatever it is that they're doing, but,
Like,
like, they're now in a situation where they now have to entertain a child for 8 hours a day while trying to work at the same time. And then they're looking at these games for something to occupy or whatever it is, like, and thinking again, oh, it's a Disney game, or oh, it's SpongeBob, or oh, it's this cute cartoon thing that my kid's into. Like, they'll be fine with that and not actually realizing when you look
it
into
is a lot
it.
about parents
Yeah,
paying attention, though, is you shouldn't just be like, oh, it's a cute thing, because, I mean, dear God, let's look at the YouTube videos.
yeah,
Those, like,
Hmm.
Elsa Spider-Man videos that from the thumbnail look like a cute kids video.
mm,
They're not.
yeah,
You have to kind of, I don't want to place all the blame on the parents because I think there's enough blame to go around. I think that, one, you should put more than the tiny text that I have to squint to read on my phone declaring that you can buy things in the
mm,
game. And two, like the onus on the parents is like you have to pay attention
mm,
what your kids are doing.
yeah,
There's
I've
a
made a vow with myself that I'm never going to be that parent that just plops my kid down in front of a screen and walks away for several hours. I'm going to be actively involved in the stuff that he likes, and he will never have access to anything that has my credit card attached to it.
mm,
But um,
there's a lot of pressure on parents nowadays too. I mean, not only do we have the COVID thing going on, the changes in how we raise kids over the last generation or two, but I mean, another thing we haven't really talked about is these kids that will pester their parents to death because their friends are playing the game, and if their friends have better characters or
oh
something
yeah,
like that, they are going to just pester their parents constantly until they have the game and be able to have it. And
these kinds of things have made rampant consumerism affect kids. Because, like, I don't know about you guys. When I was a kid, I didn't really care about brand names or having, like, the newest, greatest thing. Or, like, but I have kids throwing full-out tantrums in my store at, like, 7 or 8 years old because they can't have a PS5. And it's, like, the new big thing. And, like, I didn't get a PS2 till, like, a couple of years after it came out because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah. But I
bought my own systems. So.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that big of a deal because I still had other things to do. And you get, like, kids that care about brand names, like 11-year-olds who only wear Nike. Like, what? And I think it's part of, like, just the way that rampant consumerism has, like, in our society. It's weird, like, the effects that sort of has, because it is like there's mocking names that kids have for kids in Fortnite that don't have all the premium skins. They literally mercilessly bully these kids for it. Because, like, money doesn't grow on trees and these kids can't afford it, but that doesn't matter. It's the new, like, being picked on because, you know, you don't have a Lisa Frank notebook. That's what this is. The thing is a Lisa Frank notebook was like $8 at Walmart.
Yeah.
And a single Fortnite skin is $20 to $30.
Yeah. I think though, when you look at it from that perspective, like, this isn't something that's new though. Like, kids pestering their parents for the latest and greatest thing has been something that's happened, like, since we were kids and before we were kids. I
think it's more intense now because I see it. Like, I obviously have to be able to look objectively because, like, when the PS2 came out, I told my parents I wanted it. And I asked for it for Christmas and I asked for it for my birthday. But I wasn't, throwing a screaming fit on the floor of a store.
No, but there was always that kid that was in the store doing that. Like,
the problem is it's a lot more than just that one. It's like every kid in my store. And part of it is, like, a lot of us, and I'm going to try not to fall into this trap, but parents want to do better for their kids than their parents could do for them. And I'm financially pretty okay with me and my boyfriend both working. We're financially pretty okay. I can afford things that I would like to have. I can afford nice things for my kid, but I'm going to have to try and temper myself because I've seen parents. I have a guy who's a regular. I love him to death, and I love his kids. Like, they're all, like, great, except his kids are entitled little brats sometimes, and he did that. His fault. They all have their own PlayStation 4. They all have their own Xbox One. They all have their own rooms with their own they all have the latest iPhone, and these are like 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. And, like, they all have the latest Nike shoes, and they all have this. Like, he spends all his money on them because he wants to do better for them, but he doesn't make them share anything. They always have to do stuff. He doesn't, it's this idea that we want to do so much better for our kids that we're not teaching them the things that we learned by not having everything. Like, me and my brother and sister learned to share. Why? Because we could only afford one video game system. So we had to
having their kids do chores to earn money and then buy it themselves. That's what I had to do. I mean, my very first game system was an original Nintendo, and that I got as a Christmas gift. And then every other system after that, from Super Nintendo through N64, I bought from either doing paper route stuff or working a, like, fast food job at 15 years old. My parents, I love them, but they were broke growing up and they didn't know how to use money very well. And so I had to learn to buy my own things. And if you have like 3 kids and you just give them all Xboxes and iPhones and all that stuff, they're not going to have any understanding of the value of it. I mean,
well, no, and I mean, that's a big thing, but we're getting into a conversation that we haven't. I'm in some parenting groups, as are most parents who are on the internet. We're getting into a larger conversation about, like, parenting because it looks different than it used to. There are a lot more things that we need to navigate. It is harder because there's things that, like, I mean, dear God, kids will freak out that you're abusing them on the internet. Like, I've had 16-year-olds on Tumblr because I still have a Tumblr. I post game reviews on it. It's really small and it's just for people who like to read it. But I've had, like, kids that I follow that, like, I like they do draw pretty art or whatever. So I follow them and they, like, freak out because their parent took their cell phone away and they think it's abuse because we're in a place where parents do kind of have to walk a really weird line on, like discipline that is appropriate. Obviously, don't beat your kids. This is a
Mm.
different day and age. Spanking doesn't work. It's been proven to not work by
Mm.
psychology, but kind of been transitioned into this whole group of moms and like parents who think that any form of discipline, which is incorrect. I mean, if you tell your kid, this is as much time as you're allowed to play your PlayStation, and then you have to do your homework, and if your grades slip, you can't play it anymore because your homework in your school is very important, and then you take it away, those are the parents who will come after you because that's, you can't, teaching your kids to fear you through discipline. And I'm like, no, because every time you go through life, there's consequences. If I don't show up for work, do I get to keep my job?
I think it's boundaries, isn't
I don't
it?
do my job. Do I get the job?
Yeah.
So it's teaching building blocks of actions have consequences. If you fail a class, you don't get all these fun things you have anymore because they're clearly distracting you from doing what you're supposed to do, and your school is more important than playing a video game.
Yeah. And it all comes down to boundaries again, like setting those boundaries for kids and making those understandings. I'm just going to quickly go over to so we put a poll out on our Twitter just asking people like the question, do you think that companies do enough to protect customers when it comes to microtransactions, or does it all just fall on the parents to manage their devices and stuff better? It's only a small poll, but 7% said yes, that they feel that the companies do enough. 53% said no, they think they should do more, and 38% said it's down to the parents. So I think it's quite interesting that it is almost that 50-50 split between the companies and the parents, like doing more and being more informed.
I think there's equal responsibility here. The companies have the duty to inform and give options, and the parents have the duty to parent their children.
It doesn't really hurt anybody other. I mean, like, I guess you could make the argument that it hurts the company to make more restrictions on spending money. But other than that, I mean, these multi-million-dollar gaming companies and such.
Yeah, don't tell me these billionaires can't afford to lose some money. Like,
you just make it a little bit more stringent so that the parents have at least a little bit of help from the company. I mean, you lose what, maybe 2% of like a profit that you're already making.
I mean, the majority of the profits they make are off of adults who spend thousands of dollars anyway. This isn't really going to hurt their bottom line. It's whales. And a little kid typically isn't a whale because as soon as their parent finds out they're spending all that money, they don't get to play the video game anymore.
It's deleted.
What I find interesting is the fact that the kid rang up like $16,000.
It is weird that it was that much before she noticed because,
A, that she didn't notice it, and B, like, I know a lot of people that have even decent credit, and they don't have credit cards attached to their account that have $16,000 limits on it. I have a
$6,000 limit card that's not attached to anything. My emergency card for like if I need to like blow a tire or like my car blows up.
I mean, it's just like a small clue that if this person has this kind of a credit limit on their card that their kid could rack up, or if it was like a debit account or something, then they're probably just inference, like they're doing fairly well, which means they might be really busy with their jobs and their lives, and that's the whole reason that the kid ended up sitting in front of Sonic Forces in the first place.
Yeah, but I think there is like, your job is important, making money is important, but your child is more important.
I think
and at least paying just a small bit of attention to what they're doing is important for their well-being, even more than it is for your bank account.
I'm pretty sure in the article, I'm just looking through now, but the charges and stuff came across like a 2-week period or something.
Yeah. 2 weeks? 2 weeks? The kid spent $16,000. And my thing is like, I check that stuff.
Yeah.
I bet you that kid, though, is doing awesome. I bet you that kid's doing awesome in that game, though. Like,
probably, yeah.
He's got everything cranked.
I don't think I've spent $16,000 on like microtransactions or even in-game purchases at all.
I did $16,000 on my car. My
car was cheap. She a good girl, but she cheap.
I mean, from reading the article, like I don't even think it was 2 weeks. So it looks like the kid racked this money up in record amount of time. So on the 9th of July, the kid put through 25 charges totaling over $2,500. And it says here, when Jessica discovered that Apple and PayPal were drawing hefty sums, £562 here, $601 there, from her Chase account, she assumed it was a mistake or fraud and called the bank.
I mean, like, that's what I would do,
Yeah.
to be fair. If I saw, like, charges that amount happen.
Yeah. So she said, it says, still clueless that it was the child who was doing it, she filed a fraud claim in July when her bill reached $16,293.10. But it wasn't until October that she was told by her credit card company that the charges were
Dear
hers.
God, it took them way too long to do that.
Were hers, and she needed to contact Apple.
Well, you know what I find interesting about this is that, like, I think it's a pretty easy to agree that, like, it doesn't hurt companies to add more restrictions for the purchases and to make it better. There's only probably a very small minority of people that think they do just fine a job with it, which is probably people who have never been impacted by this at all. But obviously over 50% of people, at least from that little poll there, think that they could be doing more. So yeah, if the companies do more, that's fantastic. It might cut into their bottom line a little bit, but yeah, I don't think any
Not
of us
in any way that would really matter.
Exactly. Yeah. But how can the gaming society, as it is, help parents be able to be more aware? Like what could parents watch a video or teach themselves how to manage their kids' microtransaction stuff better so that they understand things like set up this card for this or set limits on here? I mean, a lot of times parents are like, we didn't know we could do that, or we didn't know how that would happen. So what would be the best way to teach them how to take care of their kids and their kids' gaming hobbies in 2020?
Well,
like, I do it every day. It's just like my job.
Well, you're at a brick and mortar, though.
It's just like you can talk to people. Yeah, in a brick and mortar, it's easy. You just have to, like, talk to people who walk into the store. I think the big thing is it really our responsibility to do that, though?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, if you just
it doesn't hurt, but how would we even go about as a gaming
some YouTuber, maybe some, like, major YouTuber that puts out videos that says it?
That's the big thing, is it's not really gonna happen. I think Markiplier made a video about it years ago, and it didn't really accomplish anything.
But I think the thing with that is, like you say, like, what is it our responsibility? But very weirdly zooming out and taking that thought of, like, so what about when it comes to people that show people how to do things in video games? Like, there's no need for people to actually do that, but they do it anyway because it helps people out as a humanity, as society, as everything else. Like, none of the things that we do, this podcast, for example, we don't need to do this podcast, like, but we do it because it's fun and it's informative. Yeah, like,
trying to explain to people who are tech illiterate how tech things work is not fun.
No. So for me, I think it comes.
I do it for a living, and I think a big part of it is a lot of these parents don't want to be told they're doing a bad job.
Well, I think
so. I don't think that you can approach it just as somebody who's in parenting groups. I don't know that there's anything the gaming community can do, because if you don't have kids, they don't want to hear what you have to say.
I think
is the big thing. They don't want to listen to advice. They don't want to. Parenting has become this big, like,
but that puts the onus back on the parent. Like, I think to some degree that
I think the onus is in a large amount on the parents, especially because, like, I've tried to give this advice to people and they're like, oh, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just dispute it. I'll just do this. I'll just do this. They don't want to hear that there are things they don't know and that they could be doing better as a parent. Parenting is super personal, and any advice, particularly from the outside, particularly from people who don't have children, is kind of just seen on as an attack on your character. Parents get really sensitive about that kind of stuff. If I offer advice to somebody because I have a 4-year-old niece, I mean, I have a baby, but I have a 4-year-old niece, so I also have experience with toddlers. About a toddler thing, they'll be like, well, you don't actually have your own toddler, so you have no idea. Like, and I'm another parent. So,
but there's an element of embarrassment as well sometimes, I feel. Like, if somebody doesn't know, like, how an iPad works, or
and I'm
how
not really
these
sure that
work.
The gaming community is kind of equipped to deal with the embarrassment that comes with addressing people's parenting issues.
I think
a big part of it, I think the people who can help are gamers who are parents in parenting groups.
Yeah.
But I don't think like you
honestly think,
as childless people would be able to do very much.
I
'cause they would
honestly
just
think it actually
you out.
comes back round to the people that make these devices. Like, and
I want a
if,
bigger warning.
yeah, so like
I want a bigger warning.
in the App Store, when you click
That's not going to do anything, though. The bigger warning's not going to do anything. They put giant warnings on cigarette packs that say it's going to kill you, and people still buy them. Bigger warning's not going to do anything.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. A bigger warning will at least let parents know that these things are available. Because in text that small, when you're just like scrolling,
Yeah.
the text doesn't show up if you just install the app from like the select screen. Like if you look up in the list, that text isn't there.
Yeah.
So if you don't even open like the main page for the app and you just are scrolling through like kids games and it says like SpongeBob and you hit the install button, you'll never even see the in-app purchases warning. It's not there. Their only duty is to put it in their app purchase screen.
Yeah.
It should be everywhere.
I think it
because
should
there
be
are people who download the games and don't even know you can buy things in it.
It should
And
be
that's
an
not
additional.
good.
It should be an additional prompt. So when you're going through free to play games and you're hitting
It's
that
like you hit
install
the
and you're hitting,
install button,
and
it's
then
like,
it comes
this
up saying this
app has
game,
in-app purchases.
has in-app purchases ranging from $1 to $250, whatever it is. Oh, I'm going all out of focus. I also think like as Apple, for example, let's take them. If you're buying like an iPad and setting it up and stuff, like, you know, is there a way they could put something that's like, who is this for? Is this device for you or is it for your child? Like, and if you're setting it up as a child's device,
Make parental control easier to do.
Yeah.
Because they're super complicated for no reason.
Yeah, then come through, because every time you get like an update and stuff, like they'll throw up this big thing of like, what's new in this store, or go to the how-to and everything else. Like, surely there should be like a parent section for that and go, okay, like, you're going to give this device to your kid. Like, here's some hints and tips of how to make your device safe for that child and safe for you to be able to monitor what games they're playing, how much time they spend on it, all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, what can they purchase? How can they purchase? Is there a limit? Can I set a limit? Those kind of things. Like, I think that would be the pillar. I think, you know.
Yeah, I don't even think the onus falls on the gaming companies. A lot of the onus, I feel like, falls on companies like Apple and Google, where you're actually the platform you're actually purchasing things to kind of make things like parental controls easier to implement. Because like there are no parental controls in Sonic Forces.
Yeah.
There are Apple parental controls.
Yeah.
And I think Apple has a duty to make those things a little bit easier to understand. It's so strange. Apple is touted as user friendly, and their parental control system is stupid. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you try to set it up. It's not super explanatory on what like every option does, and I feel like it should be. But no, I think the onus is a big 50-50. Parents need to pay attention and like actually research stuff that their kids are into. You can't just like go, oh, this is a SpongeBob thing, it'll be fine. You should maybe look at it a little bit more closely. But I also think that companies like Google and Apple and like Sony and Microsoft, even with like free to play and like things like Fortnite on consoles, because you can do the same thing there, have more of a duty for easy access of parental controls and an easier understanding of them, like when you're just setting up the device or setting up an account. Is like I just feel like that would make things a little bit easier on parents, because it is hard to be a parent right now. And I say that as a parent, you know, but I also don't think that we as parents can shirk our responsibility to parent our children.
You know, this whole conversation actually just made me think of something from my childhood, is that we didn't have microtransactions and stuff, but before the advent of the cell phone, where you could ring up phone charges talking to people long distance and stuff like that. How many stories did we hear like 10 years ago where it was, oh, I called my
kids
friend.
making phone calls.
Yeah, they'd make a phone call to their friend, and then suddenly, I mean, they made Simpson episode about it. You know, when Bart called Australia. You know, nowadays we don't think about it because long distance doesn't really mean much anymore. If we have somebody in another country,
buying pay-per-view stuff. Does that happen?
Pay-per-view stuff. Yep, that was one.
That stuff you wouldn't even see until it appeared on your cable bill.
Yeah,
exactly.
And also when it came to, you remember though, you said text for a ringtone.
Yep.
Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we've had these kind of microtransaction stuff for a while, and kids have been able to do this whole thing where they ring up their parents, bill for years. It's just evolved from, talking to Susie on the phone for 2 hours and ringing up a huge long distance
Just
bill.
buying $100 worth to buying $1,600 worth. Sorry, 16,000 worth of dollars of Sonic rings.
Well, wasn't it
Yeah.
Bart rang up like
Big number.
$100,000
I have that much
dues
money
or
in my
something
bank
like that in
account.
that episode? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's shifted. I think
I definitely shifting the blame from the parents to the company is, I don't think, entirely fair as a parent.
Everybody can do better. Companies
I think
and parents
everybody
together.
can do better.
Yeah.
On that note, it's like 10 minutes to 3, and my son's supposed to be back home. So have to go.
That's fine.
be a parent.
Well,
Isn't that exciting?
Well, I think we'll just leave that there then. I think.
Yeah, or we're gonna talk for the next 3 hours on parenting,
As
because
we-
that's a large.
As we
part
go
of what
around, I
this
think
is.
it's just really important. If you're a parent out there listening to this podcast, I mean, hello, thank you. But get yourself informed, go out there, find these forums and stuff, and just be aware of what microtransactions are and what these in-app purchases and stuff are,
And
because
feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Anybody like needs
We have
to
Twitter,
talk, like about anything.
we can
Feel
continue
free to DM me on
conversation on
Twitter.
there.
Tell me where you
Yeah.
find me. Don't be creepy about it.
Sweet. Have you got time just to quickly go through what you're playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
It's
So-
Cyberpunk. It's Cyberpunk.
No one's surprised.
Yeah. Surprised Pikachu face from
Yeah.
everybody in the audience. It's a mess, but it's a beautiful mess. And I think that's like, I don't know, Beardy, if you would agree with that, because it is kind of a mess.
It's
But it's
buggy.
a fun, beautiful, buggy mess.
Yeah.
But it looks gorgeous, and I don't like on the PS5. We're playing last gen's version, so it's not even as pretty as on PC. On PC, it's like the prettiest game I've ever seen in my life on PC.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
But and I'm sure it'll look that good once we get the next gen like update, which
Yeah.
is apparently
I think-
coming next year. But at this point, I'm more concerned about the bugs, and there's a lot of bugs. Right before we started filming this, I loaded up a save, and my car exploded for no reason and flew to the top of a building, and I then fell off of and died. So, there's some issues
Yeah.
that need to be worked out.
I think it's there's something special there in this game. It's just a shame that the lead up to it, the bugs, the crashes, the last gen base model issues that people are facing and stuff has created this like
Oh, yeah, it's
storm.
unplayable. It's unplayable on last gen. I still have my PS4 upstairs.
Yeah.
It's basically a glorified Netflix machine now.
Mm.
But I thought I'd hop in Cyberpunk and see. It runs at like 17 FPS. We're getting sub 20 frames per second.
It's like
And this is
N64
primarily a
graphics.
shooter, so that
Yeah.
is unplayable. 17 FPS for a shooter is unplayable,
Yeah.
and it's inexcusable to me that it came out in that state, because it was advertised for those consoles, and like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
the CEO said it ran surprisingly well. If surprisingly well is it boots up after it installs, I suppose that's a true statement.
Yeah.
But it's,
I-
there was a lot of shady stuff going on with the way the reviews were done.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't letting people review console copies. They all had to roll straight B-roll. And as somebody who used to professionally review games for a very brief period of time, there are parts where they'll be like, hey, use B-roll. So, like, for example, like Persona 5, Atlas didn't want anybody to show anything after a certain point in the game. So it was use footage from before that, and then when you run out, you can use B-roll. It is unheard of to have the company tell you you can only use trailer footage. Like, they weren't allowed to even show PC gameplay. They had to just roll trailer footage in all of their videos, which is, it's shady. There's a lot of things that I think CD Projekt Red needs to fall on their sword for, because they screwed up. As Angry Joe would say, you done fucked it up.
Yeah.
But
I honestly feel like, had they come out with this game and it was buggy and it was a mess and everything else, and it was a complete surprise to them that these issues were happening or whatever, then that's a different story. But
they clearly knew.
The narrative that's coming through from the press releases and stuff that they've put out in the last couple of days is they knew it was fucked.
They definitely knew it was fucked up.
They knew it
should have
was-
just. I'm disappointed because they kept saying it'll be ready when it's ready,
Mhm.
and then what happened to that?
Yeah.
And I know, Beardy, you don't think it's because they had any pressure because they said in a press release there was no pressure to release it. But I'm gonna be honest, I think that's dumb
Yeah.
and that's garbage. Even if they did feel pressure, they aren't gonna say that in a press release. You can't blame your fans in
But
any way or come across as if you're blaming your fans, because
this
then
was
it's worse press.
This was a call to their investors, as their investors have pretty much said, like, we need to have a conversation about
That
this.
stuff is also recorded,
Yeah.
and people are well aware that stuff
Yeah.
is recorded too.
Um,
And you're not going to want to make your investors feel like you're blaming them either when you're talking to them, like, oh, you totally didn't pressure us. But I definitely think that at least there was definitely some pressure. I mean, when they delayed it last time, they got death threats. Like, it was nuts. Like,
Yeah.
some of these people are crazy. And the stock definitely would have dropped if they delayed it again. I think it would have dropped 30% like it has since the game released. Probably not. This was probably a poor decision. They should have just delayed it. I think it need probably another year to get like the AI competent and work out all the bugs. There's features from the trailer that just aren't in the game, like certain takedowns and things. I mean, I can get cool cybernetic blades for my arms, but I can't go get a haircut.
Yeah.
There's just some stuff about the game that really bothers me. But at its core, I told Bot, I was like 8 out of 10. Docket a point for performance issues, so it's 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And it would be an 8 out of 10, which, by the way, Cyberpunk fanboys, don't come after me. 8 out of 10 is a good score. 7 out of 10 is still an above average score. Okay, please no. I mean, that happened with The Last of Us too, as well. Anybody who said it was anything other than like a perfect 10 out of 10 was like the worst. It was really funny. Is everybody was like screaming about those like lower scored reviews, and then Cyberpunk came out, and people were like, "Oh, fair enough."
Yeah,
like
I feel like the conversation about it's really interesting, but I honestly, hand on heart, feel like CD Projekt Red knew that they were in a good position publicly with their image and everything else to think that they could get away with this. Because had this been, like, you look back towards, like, BioWare, for example, a beloved...
Had this been BioWare or Bethesda or Blizzard or any company that isn't already, like, beloved by everybody the way CD Projekt Red is, this would be a much bigger deal than it is.
And that's the
there
thing.
would be nobody defending them.
Yeah.
Like, it's because this is CD Projekt Red that people are not literally trying to go burn their offices down. It's like, I mean, look at what happened when Fallout 76 came out. Like, it was a huge deal.
Yeah. And that's another game
still
where...
a big deal, but it's a slightly less big deal.
Yeah, and this is another game where 76 is an example of a company releasing a game that they knew was broken and was not ready for market, but did it anyway.
I don't think Fallout 76 ever would have been ready for market. It was a $60 mod for a Fallout 4.
Yeah,
that's like a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I know. Poor Llama's not here. I know Llama likes it, but like
she loves it for the
It's gotten better from what it sounds like.
Yeah,
I think that game was.
It sounds like it's gotten better.
Yeah, unless the only thing I can say about the Cyberpunk thing is they really need to pull a No Man's Sky on this game.
And to pull a No Man's Sky and make it the best game ever, because like No Man's Sky is they won an award at the Game Award.
Speaking
best
of which,
ongoing. I was kind of beautiful.
You've been playing some No Man's Sky, so tell us about that.
I've just been playing some of the early level stuff when I've got time to sit down. This holiday season and work and stuff's definitely made it hard to really sit down and enjoy some gaming. But it looks gorgeous, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to finding some of these new planets and such, and there's a lot more you can do now. So I'm looking forward to see what's going to be going on with it. But I will be getting Cyberpunk also this weekend, likely, and I can tell everybody has very strong opinions on it, and we're going to have to bring this topic up again later on. So once we've all gotten some chance to play.
Don't ask him what he thinks about it, because he gets a big sad face on.
But so I've been playing that, mostly just working on getting our Rolling with Bot campaign going. I've been putting a lot of time into that D&D campaign so that we can all have a fun time and have an original story. And that's about it. I'm looking forward to playing Cyberpunk and seeing my own experiences with it.
Sweet. Well, let's wrap it up for today then. Thank you very much to everyone that has joined us. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at gaymersassemble. Make sure you hit that follow, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff to make sure that you get the latest news and information from us. But for today, say goodbye, Anara.
Bye-bye, guys.
Say goodbye, bot.
Later, guys.
And as always, I have been the Bearded Gamer, and I shall wish you good night. And because I forgot it last time, Tiggs, this one's for you. Keep calm and game on. Ta-ra!